The Darkside of Hollywood by the Prowler. May I direct your attention to the scene below, at the single car driving down the California coast. Inside the 1959 custom convertible Ferrari 400 Super America sits Julian Craven, the famous actor, who is becoming quite legendary. He won the Oscar in 1957 for Best Lead Actor and is the favorite to win it again this year. You would think he hadn't a care in the world, but if you look closely, he's stressed about something. He looks almost panicked. He's hiding something. We're catching him not long after leaving a New Year's Eve party held at Lucille Ball's house. While yes, the party was grand, and the who's who of Hollywood were in attendance, and even though he had a great time, he left right as the ball dropped in Times Square. As the clock struck midnight, ushering in the new year, he was out the door, quickly making his way to his car. Now we see him, a razor-eyed stare on the dark California coastal road. And while his demeanor looks cool, there's something wrong with this picture. He's alone, and he shouldn't be. You see, he arrived at the party with his fiancée, the starlet, Lacey Giroux. But now she's nowhere to be seen. Where is she? Well, if you look closely, you'll see her blood staining the passenger side seat. While minuscule and hard to see, it's there. And even though you cannot see her, she is riding in the car. It's just that she's lying in the trunk. A young rising starlet, whose star was burning bright, suddenly snuffed out by a jealous rage. Now the soon-to-be legendary actor sits alone, legendary now for a different reason, driving in the dark, contemplating what to do next. A great career ruined with one swipe of a razor blade's edge. What's he to do now? Well, as life sometimes will, it answers, and answers cruelly. Just as Mr. Craven turned the corner, a black cat jumped in front of his luxurious car, and while not completely drunk, he had enough earlier in the evening that dulled his senses and prevented him from acting and thinking clearly. And before he knew it, he swerved hard to the left and drove right off the cliff and into the ocean. One of Hollywood's it couples taken out on New Year's Eve night. And only one was to blame. The mangled car and the bodies were found, washed up on the rocky shore. What strange, cruel fate fell upon these two stars. But so goes on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 2, The Screenwriter. Imagine, if you will, the feelings and emotions you would be experiencing of finally achieving your life's goal, finally reaching the top of whatever profession or craft you've chosen in this life. Now imagine that path leading you to Hollywood, the fame, the glitz, the glamour, everything that's associated with being a star. How exciting and exhilarating it must feel to have finally reached the top. We now look in on an individual who has recently found his Hollywood success story and whose star is seemingly on the rise. The setting we find ourselves in is a 2-room Spanish-style bungalow on the outskirts of Beverly Hills. While quite suitable For a struggling upcoming writer, it just doesn't quite fit the bill for an established screenwriter, or at least that's what Ryan's friends tell him, but he is still quite pleased with the tiny domicile. Speaking of Ryan, he is who the subject of our latest story is about. The writer in question, Ryan Rush. A man who is coming to grips with a question I posed to you all to start our latest journey. After years of struggling as a writer of short stories that were published here and there in magazines, and occasionally a staff writer on shows such as I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners, Ryan has finally found his star on the rise. He has suddenly found himself to be in quite the demand after landing a contract with MGM Studios following the submission of his first screenplay. It is said that Louis B. Mayer read it himself and was so intrigued, so enthralled, that he greenlit the project on the spot. Needless to say, after the news leaked out, Ryan's name began to spread like wildfire throughout the industry. So why is it we find our latest Hollywood success story sitting at his desk, staring at his typewriter in his darkened living room? Instead of happiness and joy as his emotions, you can see he looks frightened and worried. If you look closer, you can see his forehead drip with sweat and heavy bags under his eyes, as if he hasn't slept in days. What is plaguing our young screenwriter's mind? I direct your attention to the desktop and the two items lying next to Ryan's trembling hand. First, a copy of his screenplay, The Rebel Movie Star, about a young star who seemingly came from nowhere and took Hollywood by storm, but liked to live life on the edge with his fast cars and fast lifestyle until it all ended one night in a tragic car accident. The second item is a newspaper from this morning with a tragic headline reporting of James Dean's untimely death in a fiery automobile accident. Ryan probably wouldn't have given it a second thought if the similarities weren't eerily familiar. The character was loosely written based on James Dean and his lifestyle. Hell, the studio heads, the producers of the film, and Ryan just had lunch with James the other day, discussing starring in the picture, and rumors are the star agreed, and a contract was already silently agreed upon. There were just too many coincidences for Ryan to ignore, especially the manner of death between his character and James, which were exactly the same. Was he cursed? Bad luck? Or was this all just an extreme matter of horrific coincidence? Ryan wasn't sure, but his friends and loved ones convinced him it was just a mere coincidence and to move on. The studio moved on, and the movie continued with a new lead playing Ryan's character, starring Steve McQueen. The movie was a success and received multiple Oscar nominations and wins, including Best Original Screenplay for Ryan Rush. From there on out, it was up and up for Mr. Rush. After the subsequent success of The Rebel Movie Star, with countless projects and even more awards achieved, he was now the most sought-after screenwriter in Tinseltown, the very best. With each passing project and latest success, the memory of the tragedy fades from his mind. While there have been minor incidences involving his movies, there's been nothing to the effect of what happened during The Rebel Movie Star. We now fast forward 4 years, almost 5 to be exact, and we find our legendary screenwriter in a familiar setting, alone in the dark, secluded in his study, inside his mansion in Beverly Hills, sitting at his writing desk. Despite the massive upgrade in his surroundings, he sits alone at his desk, once again with a look of fear and solemnness on his face. Once again you can see the sweat dripping from his forehead and the weariness on his face. He is once again plagued by heavy burdens. Beside him sits his 2 latest screenplays and multiple newspapers, and in front of him still, in his typewriter, sits the screenplay he is currently working on, unfinished but almost at its completion. The first screenplay, which was written a few short weeks ago, is titled A Superhero's Comeback, the story of a television star who found stardom playing a very prominent superhero in the early days of television, to finding his star fade after the show's end and his constant typecast and lack of prominent roles, to then start his comeback to only have it end with his untimely death, which is surrounded in mystery and controversy. Next to that screenplay sits the newspaper published 2 days after the screenplay was greenlit for approval by the movie studio. The headline reported of the mysterious, untimely death of George Reeves, the actor who played Superman. It says he may have taken his own life during a party he and his wife were having, but there is evidence saying otherwise and contradicting eyewitness accounts. Truly a mysterious death. The incident has given Ryan reminiscent feelings from 4 years earlier of dread and disbelief. His character dies similarly to the real-life star, and he used said star as inspiration when writing his script, and even had the star in mind to star in the picture. This news has had Ryan in seclusion for the past 2 weeks, filled with angst, but the most recent screenplay and newspaper article might send him completely over the edge. His latest screenplay, which was just given the go-ahead a few days ago, titled When the Music Fades, is about 3 separate musicians and their journeys from obscurity to the top of the music charts, to them hooking up and going on a sold-out tour, to one fateful snowy night where they boarded a plane that would lead to their sudden demise. Next to the screenplay is the newspaper, fresh off the presses. The headline reads, February 3rd, 1959, the day the music died. A picture showing a wreckage of a plane and reporting of the deaths of Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper left Ryan in almost a state of fear at this point. 3 popular musicians all die in a horrific accident, similar to how his characters die. Our screenwriter sits at his desk, not knowing what to do. The same old questions race through his head once again. Am I cursed? Am I bad luck? Maybe my typewriter is cursed. Or is this all just a horrible coincidence? Just some cruel cosmic fate? Ryan vowed never to write another screenplay, for he feared of any more death. But did he stop? Some say no. Some say he eventually continued, just under a pen name, and that he was responsible for many other stars' untimely deaths. It is rumored that the last screenplay that was sitting in his typewriter near completion was called Legendary for All the Wrong Reasons. It's about a famous Oscar-winning actor who kills and stuffs his starlet's wife's body into his Italian sports car's trunk, and drives down the darkened California coastal highway to only have a cat jump into the middle of the road that causes the legendary actor to swerve and drive off the cliff into the ocean, killing him. A story very similar to the demise of Julian Craven and the two-time Oscar-winning actor. A script was greenlit just 3 days before the actor's death under a different writer's name. We'll never know if the great screenwriter Ryan Rush has a death curse placed upon him, or if his old 1939 Shepard's typewriter was cursed, which some say it was. Their reasoning is the typewriter was missing the number 4, and the screenplays and deaths occurred every 4 years. Who's to say what the reason for these events truly was? What we do know is the answer to the question I posed to you all in the beginning. What would you do if you suddenly found Hollywood stardom thrust upon you? Would you enjoy it? Could you ever give it up? We found out one man's answer. Well, yes, he found himself burdened by the fame at times. He could never really walk away from the fame, even if it's fame that can only be found in the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 3. The Starlet and the Husband. I ask for your undivided attention once again as our subject enters the room. A woman of great renown, her grace and elegance knows no bounds, and while she is now middle-aged and has been on the scene for some time now, she is still as beautiful as ever. Just look at the people stare in amazement at her beauty. She commands any room she enters. I, of course, am referring to movie starlet Julie Lamont, star of stage and screen. What else needs to be said about this legendary actress? A multiple award winner who boasts 1 Oscar win, 3 Tony Awards, and 2 Golden Globes. She truly is Hollywood royalty, even compared to the other greats of her day. A rising star by the time she was 12, Julie was already a household name, thanks in part to her popular Lamont and Rooney Mysteries series, which she starred alongside Mickey Rooney. After missing out on the lead role in The Wizard of Oz, which went to her longtime rival, Judy Garland, she quickly jumped to Broadway and found success with the hit show Baby Needs a New Pair of Shoes, But Daddy's Broke, which she starred alongside Walter Pidgeon. She became the youngest to ever win a Tony Award, and the show, during its run, became the longest-running show in Broadway history. She then returned to Hollywood, where she would star in the show's film adaptation, starring alongside Spencer Tracy, which she became close friends with, along with his partner, Katharine Hepburn. Ms. Lamont took no prisoners after her early success and let no one stand in her way on her meteoric rise. Her feuds with Judy Garland and Joan Crawford were legendary, and even as a young up-and-comer, she refused to take any nonsense from any man. She earned her roles legitimately. She never sat on any executive's or producer's casting couch for a role, and if anyone ever tried, she slapped them and refused to work with them ever again. Along the way, on her journey to the top, she met a young chorus dancer during her Broadway show Latin Nights and Fever Dreams, a gentleman by the name of Ricardo Sands, who eventually became her husband. She pulled him from relative obscurity and turned him into a star by having him co-star in 4 of her movies during the 50s, and they also starred together in their hit TV show, The Housewife and the Bandleader. The years were kind to both career-wise, and they grew their family by 2, but marriage-wise, it was turbulent, and rumors of cheating and abuse ran rampant across the Hollywood social scene. Ms. Lamont, however, was very proud, and once these rumors became public, in an article by gossip columnist Hedda Hopper, she became enraged. Ms. Lamont confronted Hedda at a dinner party hosted by Vincent Price and made quite the fiery scene. She took the paper the column was written in and threw it at Ms. Hopper's feet, screaming to stop writing falsehoods about her marriage, that the rumors were untrue and fabricated lies, because she would never stand for that sort of action and humiliation from her husband. She then exclaimed if it were to be true, she would kill him. Then, before walking away, she took her black dinner-gloved hand and slapped Miss Hopper across the face, smiled, and warned her to never do it again. Beware of the Lamont temper, people would say. You just never know when it might strike or how bad it might be. Which brings us to our present situation. Ms. Lamont and her husband are throwing their annual Oscar announcement party, and the who's who are present, waiting to find out if they've been nominated. But where is the hosting couple, you ask? They are not present, even though Ms. Lamont is waiting to hear if she's been nominated once again for her latest picture, Black Lace and Dark Promises. Word has it the two haven't been seen since an embarrassing dust-up occurred an hour earlier, when her husband, in a drunken state, became belligerent and started groping several female party guests. When she confronted her husband to try and get him to settle down, for he was embarrassing her, it is said he was heard whispering to her, "The rumors are all true. I've been cheating on your ass since the beginning." They were last seen heading towards the back of the house minutes later. That is until now. I bring you back to the beginning of our story. She's just entered the room, returning to her and her husband's party after an hour's absence, looking lovely and captivating the room. There's just one problem. Where's her husband? No one seems to notice at first, and cheers of congratulations ring out for her as news of her and a few other guests' Oscar nominations are announced. Someone finally asks, "Where's Ricardo at?" Ms. Lamont smiles and says he's sleeping it off. "He's had one too many rum and cokes," she said laughingly. Never losing her cool, she stands composed, enjoying her party. But I can see a bead of sweat trickle down the side of her face. Can't you? Little does anyone know that her husband is laying in the bathtub, dead, with a fireplace poker sticking out from the top of his head. He embarrassed her for the last and only time. "No one cheats on Julie Lamont," she exclaimed as she drove the poker into his skull. Now she stands in the middle of the room, surrounded by her party guests, giving the best acting performance of her life. No one suspects a thing, and no one will ever find out a thing. You see, after she dispatched her husband from this earth, she called famed Hollywood fixer Eddie Tremantle. She wasn't going to take the rap for killing her husband. No. Instead, you'll read in the papers tomorrow. Movie star dies in horrible car crash in Beverly Hills. Alcohol is expected to be involved. Stars like Miss Lamont don't pay for their crimes. But this all goes to show you it's even tough for stars to find love, especially when you find it on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 4. The Agent and the Fixer. How far would you go for your chance at Hollywood notoriety? Would you only settle for movie star fame, or would you take something behind the scenes, just being happy working inside the industry, only being known by a select few? Well, the gentleman in the office on Sunset Boulevard and Vine answered yes to that question. On the front door, tinseled on the glass, reads, Harlow and Tremantle. The two men met during the war and decided to come to Hollywood if they made it through. Johnny Harlow from Las Vegas and Eddie Tremantle from Bakersfield embarked on their journey to Hollywood together, but taking different paths. Harlow parlaying his lawyer and business degrees into becoming an agent to the stars, which he did successfully, and Tremantle wanted to be the next Edward G. Robinson and make it as an actor. But aside from a few bit roles in a couple of gangster movies and a Lucky Strike cigarette commercial, his hopes of making it big as an actor quickly faded, even with his friend Harlow as his agent, who was quickly rising to be Hollywood's top agent. Tremantle, however, quickly pivoted, and with his connections, he became a Hollywood fixer, and a damn good one at that. The two friends became the best at what they do in their respective fields and decided to go into business together. A one-stop shop, you might say, for some of Hollywood's elite, and the clientele that Mr. Harlow brought to the table was quite impressive. 20 clients and rising are in their impressive stable, including Oscar-winning actors Humphrey Bogart and his wife Lauren Bacall, the Oscar-winning screenwriter Ryan Rush, horror legend Vincent Price, two-time Oscar winner Julian Craven, crooner Dean Martin, legendary actress Julie Lamont, baseball star Don Drysdale, just to name a few. Mr. Harlow takes care of all their needs, contractual, financial, and personal. But if they were to get themselves into any trouble, let's say something career-threatening, like getting a girl pregnant while still in a marriage, or drug-related problems, dare I say even covering up an accidental murder, or unaccidental for that matter, then Mr. Tremantle's services come into play. Payoffs, kickbacks, cover-ups, threats, all tactics at a good fixer's disposal, and Eddie Tremantle was the best at using all of them. Examples, you ask? No problem is my answer. I have enough stories from these two that could fill 2 Hollywood tell-all books. In 1962, there was a Hollywood power couple in actress Miss Julie Lamont and her husband Ricardo Sands. Well, during their annual Oscar nomination party, Mr. Sands decided to make a drunken spectacle of himself and announced to everyone at the party he was cheating on his legendary wife, and had been doing so for quite some time, which had been rumored recently throughout the Hollywood social scene. Well, Miss Lamont did not take kindly of being made to look like a fool. She never did in her life, no matter the circumstance. So she put on a smile and calmly asked her husband to accompany her to the back of the house so they could speak in private. While away from their famous party guests and in the seclusion of their bedroom, she unleashed her famous temper upon her husband and drove a fireplace poker into his skull and hid him in their master bathroom's lavish garden tub. She once again did not panic, and she calmly called her agent, Mr. Harlow, and he informed his partner, Mr. Tremental, that his client urgently required his services. She sat secluded in her master's suite for an hour, away from her party guests, devising a plan with Mr. Tremental. Well, it was more his plan. She calmly sat on the corner of her bed and listened to every detail, followed every instruction. She was too important to the studio for anything to happen to, and she had just signed a multi-picture contract, so there were plenty of people invested in her continued success. Mr. Tremental put his plan into motion and told Miss Lamont to return to her party, and if asked, say that Ricardo decided to sleep it off. Meanwhile, he carried his corpse out of the back sliding glass door and into the garage and sat him in the passenger seat. Mr. Tremental asked for a bottle of scotch, then got in the driver's seat of the couple's Mercedes, then headed for the Hollywood Hills. He parked on the side of the road, once high enough up in the hills, and set the scene. He moved the body over to the driver's seat, then poured the bottle of scotch all over the body and the inside of the car. He then put the car in drive and drove it over the cliff, making for the perfect accident. And that's exactly how it was perceived. No one suspected Miss Lamont of any wrongdoing. Another story I know of is how he made a certain photographer disappear, who was stalking the legendary Marilyn Monroe. Mr. Tremental got the okay from studio execs to protect their investment, and he made sure the photographer met a grisly demise. Rumor has it a meat grinder was involved. Is it true? Who really knows? Let's just say I wouldn't eat the burgers from the Bob's Big Boy in Burbank if I were you. Mr. Tremental was not afraid to get his hands dirty, and if murder was called for to protect his clients, he would not hesitate. Over and over, he's carried out his tasks of protecting his clients. But as we look into the office of Harlow and Tremental, we see an office that's disheveled. Papers are strewn about, and Harlow's desk chair has been turned over. Tremental is sitting at his desk in the dark, with his head in his hands, shaking and in disbelief at what he has just done. But where is Harlow? Look closely, if you please, near Harlow's desk. Now look down. There's his $300 wingtip poking out from behind the desk, and attached to that expensive shoe is the dead body of Johnny Harlow, super agent to the stars, murdered by his friend and partner. Why, you ask? No one knows for certain, but some believe it has to do with the old familiars that cause problems between men, money, and a woman. It is said Tremental was having an affair with Harlow's wife, and they were in love. Harlow found out and confronted his partner, but was killed when he tried to attack in anger. It is also believed that Mr. Harlow was skimming from the books and embezzling from the business. Things have come to a horrific end to this partnership, two heavyweights in their respected fields, the agent and the fixer. The fixer, however, is in considerable trouble because the agent was popular and important. Now the question is, how can the fixer fix his own problem when that problem is on the dark side of Hollywood? The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 6, The Actress and the Director. I pose to you all a question. How would you feel if your Hollywood dreams were becoming a reality before your very eyes? Excited? Thrilled? Overcome with joy and happiness? That all sounds about right to me. We look in on two individuals with two different paths to their dreams of Hollywood stardom. First, an actress from Dallas, Texas. Blonde and beautiful, she broke into Hollywood as an extra in a film starring Anthony Quinn. Then, after a few other minor roles, she did some TV, and then finally she landed a more prominent role in the 1966 film Eye of the Devil. Things were starting to pick up for our actress in question as she landed her first major role in Valley of the Dolls, which earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Promising Newcomer. Later that year, she did the film The Fearless Vampire Killers, where she met her future husband, the director of the picture, who, by the way, is our second individual. Born in Paris, France, he got his start directing small movies in Poland, which also happens to be his nationality. He found success with his first full-length feature film directed in Poland called Knife in the Water, which was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. He then went to England, where he made his first 3 English-speaking films, the third being the film he met his wife on. By the next year, he was in the United States, married, and was chosen to direct a picture that would finally bring him notoriety, which was Rosemary's Baby. The couple married in 1968, and not only were their Hollywood dreams taking off, they were also expecting a child. This young Hollywood couple on the rise seemed to have it all, and of course the couple I'm referring to is Sharon Tate and her husband, Roman Polanski. They just started renting a house located on Cielo Drive from a music producer friend, which is where I bring your attention to next. Things are looking up for our couple. Careers are progressing, and family life is upon them. On this night, however, fate has Mr. Polanski out of town directing a movie, but his wife is not alone. She is surrounded by friends, and they are having a small get-together at their home on Cielo Drive. As you can see, the group of friends are enjoying themselves and about to unwind for the night. They haven't a care in the world. If I may advert your attention to just outside the home, however, you can see a group of people standing on the lawn, staring through the windows at Miss Tate and her guests. Sadly, these are deranged cult members from the Manson family, and they're standing outside the home on Cielo Drive, ready to carry out their crazed leader's plans of chaos and destruction. The night is horrific and gruesome. There's no happy endings or dreams come true. This group of deranged killers took the young movie starlet's Hollywood dream away, and also the dream of becoming a mother. But her dreams were not the only ones taken away. Also her friends' dreams of becoming the next great hairstylist or the next great screenwriter. Multiple dreams were snuffed out that night, dreams that turned into nightmares. But that's what happens when you dream on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 7. The Stage Actress Goes to Hollywood. Let me pose the question to you all. You've decided to come to Hollywood and achieve your dreams of becoming a star. Your prior success on the stage, although minor, has given you a sense that this endeavor will be an easy task for you to pull off. But what if, when you arrived in Hollywood, you discovered your goals would not be so easy to accomplish? Dare I even say, what if you found downright rejection that greeted you at every turn? That brings us to our next star, sadly, only to be featured on the dark side of Hollywood. There she is, walking down the side of the road, alone in her thoughts. She moves with a sense of purpose, but if you look closer, you'll notice there's a sway of sadness in her movements. She has just left her house, where she informed her uncle that she was leaving to go to the store, then see some friends, and that she would return later in the evening. But that was a lie. Instead, she was out searching for an ending to her story, and she found it at the foot of Mount Lee and the Hollywoodland sign. I'm of course referring to Millicent Lillian Entwistle, affectionately known as Peg by her friends and family. Peg, a stage actress from New York, originally from England, who came to America with her actor father at a young age, hasn't been in Hollywood for long. She has had somewhat of a successful journey with her time on the stage and starred in many Broadway plays, working alongside actors George M. Cohan, Dorothy Gish, and Henry Travers, among others. It is said a young Betty Davis saw Miss Entwistle perform on stage while with her mother, and that she was so moved by her performance that the young Miss Davis looked over to her mother and said, "I want to act just like her. I want to act like Miss Entwistle." And throughout her legendary career, Miss Davis always credited Miss Entwistle for her getting into acting. In the midst of her successful Broadway career, she married character actor Robert Keith, but the marriage ended, only lasting a few years, ending with claims of abuse from Miss Entwistle, and she claimed that Mr. Keith had lied of a previous marriage which resulted in a child. Not long after this unpleasantness, she decided to try her luck at bigger and better things and moved to Hollywood. She had had enough success on Broadway. Now she wanted to forge her path on the silver screen. The year was 1932, and while continuing to search for movie roles and her first big break into pictures, she landed a role in the stage production Mad Hopes, which she starred alongside Billy Burke and a young Humphrey Bogart. The play ran from May 24th to June 4th at the Belasco Theater in downtown Los Angeles. She received positive reviews from Los Angeles theater writers and critics, along with her co-star Humphrey Bogart. Not long after she landed her first and only credited movie role, called 13 Women, which she starred alongside Myrna Loy and Irene Dunn, and was produced by mega producer David O. Selznick. Her role was a minor one, but still, it was her first, and she was in the picture. Sadly, she would not live to see herself in the picture, see herself up on the silver screen, see her dreams becoming realized. No, instead, I bring you back to where we started our tale, to the woman we now know to be Peg Entwistle, standing at the bottom of the hill. But now we see her standing at the top of the hill, scaling the H of the famous Hollywoodland sign. She found the end to her story, and sadly, the ending is death. No one knows for certain why she leapt to her death. Rumors persist of her becoming distraught, of not landing consistent movie roles. Other rumors are she found out a significant chunk of her screen time was cut from 13 women, which it was. And even though the movie hadn't been released yet, early reports from test screenings thought the movie would be a box office failure, which it turned out to be. All of these instances could have been the cause, plus the realization that her Hollywood dreams were turning into a Hollywood nightmare. Sadly, the fame she sought in life, she only found in death, and the manner she chose to take it. But that is the risk you take when you dream on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 8, The Lonely Actor. Tonight's story will be of a different variety. No thoughts of what you would do to fulfill your dreams of stardom on the silver screen. Instead, in tonight's tale, our subject has already achieved their Hollywood dream and is one of the top leading men in Hollywood. So the question for all of you is, what would you do if you had everything you ever wanted? Your movie star dreams have been achieved, and you have all the lavish trappings that come with that. Now, how would you act? Humbled and appreciative of your success? Or would you become smug and think everything is owed to you? We look in on our leading man as he walks through the door of his Malibu beach home. He has returned home after a late-night dinner at Jeffrey's Malibu, the celebrity hotspot with friends Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and her husband Richard Burton. As he passes the bookshelf that houses his Oscar and 2 Golden Globes, he stops suddenly and picks up the object that symbolizes his successful Hollywood career, his Oscar. He stares at the golden statue, reading the nameplate, which is emblazoned, Hector Sears, Best Actor for 1948, in the film They Died at Night. As you can see, he stares longingly at his award, and if you look closer, you can see a tear leave his hazel eye. You may be wondering what could be bothering a star of the likes of the great Hector Sears. What could a star of this magnitude be so upset about? Perhaps it's the award itself. It reads Best Actor for 1948. A decade has passed since then. He's getting older. Maybe he's longing for those glory days of his career. While work has remained steady for Mr. Sears, he's starting to lose those suave leading man roles. Perhaps he's saddened by seeing his ex-wife at the restaurant, famed author Rosalie Andrews, with her new beau, baseball star Rex Charles. He suddenly drops his Oscar on the ground and stumbles over towards the burgundy upholstered chair in the living room. As you can see, he has been drinking all night and is lucky to have arrived home safely. This, of course, is not the first time he has stumbled through his front door and into his living room drunk. It may come to a surprise to you and many fans, but to those who know him best, know that Hector Sears is a notoriously bad drunk. If you further look around the stylish beach home, you can see a bachelor's life. No longer having a significant other, his drinking is what caused he and his wife's divorce. There are no pictures of children, partly for the same reason, but also because he was too busy fulfilling his Hollywood dream. He hadn't the time to start a family. I posed the question earlier, what would you do if you achieved your Hollywood dreams and were at the top, how would you act? Well, instead of humbled or smug, he chose a different answer, and that was career first, never stopping to smell the roses, never taking time for oneself, driving away anyone who tried to get close. Sad and alone, he sits looking around his lonely room. Yes, surrounded by his accolades, but not by love. He decides to get up from his chair and take himself to bed to sleep it off, like he has countless of times. But this time, he gets up too fast, and his balance is a little off. He stumbles to his left, just a little, and trips over his Oscar that had fallen, sending his forehead crashing into the corner of his coffee table. He lays slowly bleeding, alone and unconscious, on the carpet, with no one to save him. And just as he lived, he died, alone, in his beach house. He paid the price to achieve his Hollywood fame, but that price comes with consequences, and it can only be paid on the dark side of Hollywood. The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 9, The Comedian. I bring you our next subject, who has found himself on the dark side of Hollywood, a place I'm sure he never thought he'd be, but alas, here we are. The location is the Trocadero nightclub on Sunset, and the subject is comedian Ted Healy. As you can see, Mr. Healy is in fine spirits, supposedly celebrating the birth of his first child, a son, something his friends say he has always longed for. It is not all good times inside the nightclub, however, because the cause of Mr. Healy's death is also inside the lively club, and it's going to kill him tonight. He is a well-known alcoholic around Tinseltown, and he has been drinking tonight. But has he drank enough in his celebration to kill? Or perhaps it's the three gentlemen in the corner having a drink who later have a confrontation with Mr. Healy that will be the cause of his death. We shall find out a little later. Let's start at the beginning first, shall we? Born in Kaufman, Texas, birth name Charles Ernest Lee Nash. He changed his name to Ted Healy as he got into show business. He started his path to success and stardom in vaudeville, where he quickly became one of its top acts, becoming the highest paid performer with the Healy's Revue, which included his wife and German Shepherd, and at times his childhood friend, Moe Howard, from the Three Stooges, along with some of his brothers. The friends would go through some hardships, but eventually came together and created the early stages of the comedy act, The Three Stooges. After many successful stops across the country, Mr. Healy and his comedy troupe took their talents to Hollywood, where Mr. Healy received a contract with MGM. They appeared in several shorts for the company, but quickly found themselves in important supporting roles in the blockbuster film The Dancing Lady, featuring Clark Gable and Joan Crawford, with Mr. Healy getting quite the larger supporting role alongside Fred Astaire. Mr. Healy would go on and receive more major solo roles with MGM, and soon after, he would amicably split with the Three Stooges as they went to go work for another studio. He carved out quite a successful career for himself, from vaudeville comedian to appearing in many Hollywood pictures, and even having his services being loaned out to other film companies, working up until the night he died. Which brings us back to the nightclub and the night in question. Mr. Healy is in full celebration, but by the next day, he will be dead. His death was originally announced by an MGM spokesperson as a heart attack, but that was quickly questioned when there were signs of foul play on the body, featuring bruising and cuts. Then rumors came out that he was attacked, leaving the nightclub the previous night, by 3 individuals, and those individuals were popular actor at the time, Wallace Beery, movie producer Albert Broccoli, who would later achieve fame producing the James Bond series, and his cousin, agent and movie producer Pat DiCicco, known for his tumultuous marriages to actress Thelma Todd and socialite Gloria Vanderbilt. Police seemed to not be overly enthused in solving Mr. Healy's death, and there were no newspaper reports or documentation of the 3 said individuals attacking and beating Mr. Healy. That said, Mr. Broccoli admitted to having an altercation with Mr. Healy outside the nightclub, but claims Mr. Healy attacked him in a drunken rage, and that they scuffled for a few, but eventually shook hands and parted ways. There are rumors of why the other 2 were not mentioned, and why the police were not more concerned with solving the case, and that is because of the work of Hollywood fixers Eddie Maddox and Howard Strickling. You see, Wallace Beery was one of the highest paid actors in MGM and in all of Hollywood, and the 2 fixers did all they could to save him from this scandal. Mr. Beery returned from a supposed long vacation in Europe after the story died down. Officially, Mr. Healy's death was ruled acute toxic nephritis, which was only secondary to acute and chronic alcoholism. His alcoholism was blamed, but the conspiracy theories will always persist. No one will ever know exactly what truly transpired that night, except for those involved. All we know is a man who felt on top of the world, personally and career-wise, met a horrible demise. He might have had thoughts of importance, and that nothing bad could happen to him. But there's always someone more important, and they'll remind you of that when you live on the dark side of Hollywood. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.